In the heart of West Africa, where the vibrant culture of Ghana pulses with resilience and hope, a new chapter unfolds under the leadership of President John Mahama. Amid the cacophony of political promises and the weight of public expectation, President Mahama has taken a step that transcends rhetoric, a gesture so profound it resonates with the quiet power of humanity. By pledging 6 months of his salary to the Ghana Medical Trust Fund, he has not only ignited a flame of hope for his nation, but has also cast a light on the path African leaders must tread to heal a continent yearning for compassionate governance. This act, simple in its execution yet monumental in its symbolism, is a clarion call to leaders across Africa. The time for transformative leadership is now. Ghana's healthcare system, like many across the continent, is a tapestry woven with both triumphs and trials. Hospitals brim with dedicated doctors and nurses whose hands work miracles daily. Yet they often do so in the shadow of crumbling infrastructure, scarce resources, and the heart-wrenching reality of patients turned away due to unaffordable care. Imagine a mother in a rural village, cradling her feverish child through the night, walking miles under a scorching sun to reach a clinic only to find empty shelves where medicines should be. Picture a young man, his body racked by preventable disease, lying on a stretcher in a corridor because beds are occupied. These are not isolated scenes. They are echoes of a systemic crisis. It is within this landscape that President Mahama's decision emerges, not as a solution to every challenge, but as a beacon of what leadership can and should be. When news broke of President Mahama's pledge, social media buzzed with disbelief, gratitude, and a flicker of renewed faith. For many Ghanaians, it was a moment that transcended politics. Here was a leader voluntarily surrendering a portion of his livelihood to mend a broken system, an act that whispered, "I see your pain, and I share it." In a continent where leaders are often accused of opulence in the face of public suffering, this sacrifice is revolutionary. It is a reminder that leadership is not about privilege, but about responsibility, not about status, but about service. The Ghana Medical Trust Fund, designed to support healthcare infrastructure and provide financial aid to vulnerable patients, now carries the weight of this promise. But beyond the cedis and pesewas, it carries something far more precious, the belief that change begins when those in power dare to lead with their hearts. President Mahama's gesture is a mirror held up to Africa's leaders, reflecting both the potential of empathetic governance and the stark reality of missed opportunities. Across the continent, millions languish in poverty. Children die of malaria for lack of bed nets, and women risk their lives in childbirth due to inadequate maternal care. Yet, in many nations, the gap between the corridors of power and the realities of the people yawns wide. Lavish state banquets, fleets of luxury cars, and bloated security budgets stand in jarring contrast to the cries of ordinary citizens. Mahama's choice to redirect his salary challenges this dissonance. It asks a simple but piercing question. If a leader cannot share in the people's burdens, how can they claim to share in their dreams? The power of this act lies not in its scale, but in its symbolism. A president's salary, while substantial, is a drop in the ocean compared to the billions needed to overhaul Ghana's healthcare system. But its true value is in the message it sends: solidarity. It says to the nurse working double shifts without adequate PPE, "You are not alone." It says to the father selling his last belongings to pay for his child's surgery, "Your struggle is mine too." And it says to the young medical student torn between staying to serve her nation or seeking greener pastures abroad, "Your country values you." This is the alchemy of leadership, transforming individual sacrifice into collective hope. To fellow African leaders, President Mahama's pledge is an invitation to rewrite the narrative of governance. Imagine if every head of state, governor, or minister followed suit, donating even a fraction of their earnings to public health, education, or social welfare. The cumulative impact would be staggering, but the greater revolution would be in the restoration of trust. For too long, citizens have viewed their leaders as distant figures, shielded by gates and guarded by indifference. When a leader gives up personal comfort for the common good, it bridges that chasm. It transforms cynicism into belief, apathy into action. This is not merely about money, it is about moral authority. How can a leader urge citizens to pay taxes diligently if they themselves are unwilling to contribute beyond obligation? How can they demand patience during austerity measures if they live in extravagance? Africa's history is rich with examples of visionary leadership. Figures like Nelson Mandela, whose humility disarmed a nation, or Thomas Sankara, whose austerity and dedication to Burkina Faso's poor remain legendary. President Mahama's action taps into this legacy, proving that the spirit of selfless leadership is not extinct, but dormant, waiting to be rekindled. It also aligns with Ghana's storied tradition of pioneering progress, from Kwame Nkrumah's fight for independence to its modern-day role as a bastion of democracy. By tying his sacrifice to the Medical Trust Fund, Mahama underscores that health is the foundation of national prosperity. A healthy populace is not just a moral imperative, it is the engine of economic growth, innovation, and stability. Yet, the road ahead remains steep. Ghana's healthcare system, like many others, grapples with brain drain as doctors and nurses seek better opportunities abroad. Rural clinics still lack electricity and running water. Preventable diseases claim lives daily. President Mahama's donation alone cannot solve these issues, but it ignites a crucial conversation about priorities. It challenges citizens to hold leaders accountable and leaders to look beyond short-term gains. It also invites innovation, public-private partnerships, diaspora engagement, and grassroots initiatives that complement government efforts. Most importantly, it reminds us that progress is a mosaic, built not by grand gestures alone, but by countless small acts of courage and care. To the leaders watching from neighboring nations and beyond, this is your moment to rise. The people of Africa are not asking for miracles. They are asking for leaders who see their pain, share their burdens, and fight for their future. Imagine the message sent if the president of Kenya redirected a portion of his salary to equip rural hospitals with maternity wards. Picture the impact if Nigeria's governors pooled resources to provide free malaria treatments for children. Envision a continental movement where leaders compete not in displays of wealth, but in acts of sacrifice. This is the Africa we can build, one where leadership is synonymous with empathy, and power is measured not by what one accumulates, but by what one gives away. President Mahama's pledge also speaks to a universal truth. Leadership is not about titles or accolades, but about legacy. Long after his term ends, Ghanaians will remember not the speeches he gave, but the salary he gave up. They will remember that in a time of crisis, their leader chose to stand with them. This is the essence of servant leadership, a concept deeply rooted in African traditions but often forgotten in modern governance. It is a call to return to those roots, where elders led by wisdom and compassion, not force or wealth. As the sun sets over Accra, casting golden hues on bustling markets and quiet villages alike, a mother cradles her newborn in a hospital that, thanks to the Medical Trust Fund, now has an incubator that works. A teenager survives a snake bite because anti-venom was in stock. A community health worker smiles, knowing her clinic can finally afford gloves and antiseptics. These are the faces of change, ordinary lives touched by a leader's extraordinary choice. President Mahama's story is still being written, but this chapter reminds us that the best leaders are those who write their legacy not in ink, but in acts of love. To every African leader reading this, the people are watching. They are weary of empty promises, but hungry for hope. They do not ask you to forsake all comforts, but to share in their struggles. They do not demand perfection, but they deserve your humanity. Follow President Mahama's example. Let your leadership be a living prayer for your nation's healing. For in the end, history will not judge us by the palaces we build for ourselves, but by the hospitals we build for our people. The time to lead is now, with courage, with compassion, and with the unwavering belief that Africa's best days lie ahead, waiting to be born from the sacrifices we make today.